"I can heal this old woman," the little girl told the millionaire. Then she did something shocking. Let me know what you thought of this story by giving it a rating from 0 to 10 and comment what city you're watching me from. I really want to know if you like my story and get to know you better. So please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The hallway of St. Vincent's nursing home echoed with the sound of Arthur Vance's heavy footsteps as he walked for the third time that week toward room 237. At 52, the businessman, owner of a small furniture factory, carried a weight on his shoulders that seemed to grow with each visit. Beatrice Vance, his 89-year-old grandmother, had been there for 3 years, ever since the stroke that had left her in a vegetative state. The yellowish walls of the nursing home seemed to suck all hope from the environment, and the smell of disinfectant mixed with reheated food made Arthur nauseous every time he walked through the main door. On that March afternoon, the typical Georgia heat made the air inside the establishment even more stuffy. Arthur adjusted his tie and took a deep breath before entering the room where his grandmother had lain motionless for over 1,000 days. Beatrice was in the same position as always, eyes closed, her breathing controlled by machines. Her face, once full of life, now just a shadow of what it had been. He pulled the plastic chair close to the bed and sat down, as he did religiously on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. "Hi, Grandma," he murmured, his hoarse voice breaking the silence of the room. "I brought the flowers you always liked, white chrysanthemums from the garden, at home." Arthur placed the small bouquet in the vase beside the bed, his fingers trembling slightly. The last 2 years had been devastating for him. The traumatic separation from Valerie, his wife of 15 years, had sent him into a downward spiral of severe depression. The empty house, the factory he could barely keep running, and now this endless vigil beside a person who might never wake up again. "The factory is doing better this week," he continued, even though he knew she couldn't hear him. "I managed to close a contract with a decoration store downtown. Custom kitchen, cabinets. You would have been proud." His words were lost in the constant hum of the air conditioner, creating a melancholic soundtrack for those moments of shared loneliness. Arthur was about to pick up the book he had brought to read aloud when he heard small, quick footsteps in the hallway. He frowned, as it wasn't visiting hours for other families, and the nursing home staff usually walked more slowly. The footsteps approached room 237 and stopped right at the door. He turned to look and was completely perplexed by what he saw. A girl of about 4 years old was standing in the doorway with messy brown hair and a dirty t-shirt that looked like it hadn't been washed in days. Her feet were bare and caked with dirt, as if she had walked for a long time on uneven ground. But what caught Arthur's attention the most were the child's large brown eyes, which shone with an almost disturbing intensity, and what she held in her hands, a large, green, live frog, which remained strangely still between her small fingers. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" Arthur asked, quickly getting up from his chair. The girl didn't answer immediately, just observed the room with the seriousness of someone much older. Her eyes fixed on Beatrice's motionless figure on the bed, and something in her expression changed completely. It was as if she recognized something that Arthur couldn't perceive. "She's sick because there's a great sadness in her heart," the girl finally said, her soft voice contrasting with the gravity of her words. "The frog can help. He knows where the pain lives." Arthur was speechless for a few seconds, trying to process the bizarre situation. A dirty, barefoot child had invaded the nursing home, carrying an amphibian, and was talking about his grandmother as if she knew her. "Little girl, you can't be here. This is a place for sick people, not for children to play," he said, trying to keep his voice calm despite his growing discomfort. "Where are your parents? How did you get into this building?" The child completely ignored his questions and took a few steps toward the bed where Beatrice rested. Arthur instinctively moved to block her. But something in the determination of those brown eyes made him hesitate. "My name is Iris," she said simply, as if that explained everything. "And this is Rune," she added, lifting the frog slightly. "We came to help Grandma wake up." The girl's words hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. How did she know Beatrice was his grandmother? How had a 4-year-old child gotten here alone, talking about healing? And why on earth was she carrying a frog as if it were the most normal pet in the world? Before he could react properly, Iris moved with surprising speed, slipping past him and reaching the head of the bed. "No!" Arthur shouted, but it was too late. The girl had gently placed the frog on Beatrice's forehead, whispering words he couldn't quite understand. They seemed to be a mix of English with something older, more primitive. The frog remained absolutely still, as if it understood exactly what was happening. What happened in the next few seconds would leave Arthur questioning his sanity for the rest of his life. Beatrice, who hadn't shown any sign of consciousness in 3 years, slowly opened her eyes. First, just a slit, then completely, her blue eyes focusing on the ceiling with a clarity that seemed impossible. She blinked a few times, as if adjusting her vision after a long sleep, and then murmured something unintelligible, but definitely real words coming from her dry lips. "Grandma!" Arthur exclaimed, his voice breaking with emotion and disbelief. "Grandma, can you hear me?" He approached the bed, his heart beating so hard it felt like it would burst from his chest. Beatrice moved her head slightly in his direction, and although her eyes were still confused, there was life in them again. Real life, genuine consciousness. Iris carefully removed the frog from the old woman's forehead and held it against her chest again, observing the scene with a quiet satisfaction that completely contrasted with Arthur's state of shock. At that moment, the room door opened abruptly, and Carmen Novak, the nursing home director, entered hastily. "Mr. Vance," one of the nurses said she heard screams coming from this. "My God in heaven," she interrupted herself upon seeing Beatrice with her eyes open, looking around the room with slow but deliberate movements. "How? When? This is impossible," Carmen stammered, her face instantly turning pale. Carmen Novak remained paralyzed at the door for a few seconds that felt like an eternity, her eyes alternating between Beatrice, who was now slightly moving, her lips trying to form words, and the mysterious girl holding a frog as if it were the most natural thing in the world. As the director of St. Vincent's nursing home for 15 years, she had witnessed extraordinary situations, but nothing compared to this. Patients in a vegetative state simply did not wake up like this, especially not after 3 years of complete unconsciousness. "Mr. Vance," Carmen said, her voice trembling, "I need to call Dr. Albright immediately. This shouldn't be possible." She took the phone from her pocket with trembling hands, but before she could dial, Iris approached her with small, determined steps. The girl raised her large, serious eyes to the director, and for a moment, Carmen felt as if she were being examined by someone much older and wiser than a 4-year-old child. "You don't need to call anyone yet," Iris said with a calmness that made Carmen even more disturbed. "Grandma is still coming back slowly, like when you wake up from a very long dream and need to remember where you are." The way the girl spoke, with simple words, yet laden with a knowledge she shouldn't possess, made Carmen slowly lower the phone. Arthur was kneeling beside the bed, gently holding Beatrice's hand, which could now slightly squeeze his fingers. "Grandma, it's me, Arthur. Do you recognize me?" he asked, tears streaming down his face. Beatrice tried to speak again, and this time the words came out clearer, though still weak. My boy." The emotion that overcame the businessman was so intense that he had to lean on the edge of the bed to keep from falling. "How did you do that?" Carmen asked Iris, her voice a mix of fear and fascination. "Where did you come from? Who are your parents? The girl shook her head slowly, her messy hair swinging around her dirty face. My mother's name is Ilara. She taught me about the special cures before she went away. She said one day I would find people who needed my help. Her words were pronounced with a disconcerting naturalness, as if she were talking about the weather. Ilara, Arthur repeated, turning to look at the girl. That name sounds familiar. He frowned, trying to remember where he had heard that name before, but his mind was still processing the miracle he had just witnessed. And where did your mother go, Iris? When is she coming back? The girl's expression darkened slightly, and she hugged the frog tighter against her chest. She went to a place where sad people stay until they get better. But she hasn't come back yet. I've been sleeping alone for many nights. The devastating simplicity with which Iris described her situation made Carmen and Arthur exchange a worried glance. A 4-year-old child, living alone on the streets with only a frog for company. It was a situation that demanded immediate action. Iris, where have you been sleeping? What have you been eating? Carmen asked, crouching down to be at the girl's level. Are people taking care of you? The child pointed vaguely toward the room's window, which overlooked the back of the nursing home, where you could see the fence separating the property from the municipal cemetery. Over there, near the homes of those who have already left, she said, referring to the tombs in a poetic way that made Carmen swallow hard. There's a big tree that protects me from the rain, and sometimes I find fruit that has fallen on the ground. Rune helps me find clean water. She lifted the frog slightly, as if introducing an old friend. Beatrice, who had been quiet for a few minutes, suddenly tried to sit up in bed. Arthur immediately helped her, adjusting the pillows behind her back. With her voice still weak but increasingly clear, she looked directly at Iris and said something that perplexed everyone. I know this girl. She has been here before. What do you mean, Grandma? Arthur asked, feeling a chill run down his spine. You've never seen this child before. She just showed up here. But Beatrice shook her head slowly, her eyes fixed on Iris with a recognition that seemed to come from deep within her memory. No, her mother, Ilara, used to come here in secret, Beatrice murmured, each word a visible effort. She brought plants, did treatments for me. The revelation left Arthur completely stunned. How was it possible that someone had been visiting his grandmother without him knowing? And why had Beatrice never mentioned it before the stroke? Iris approached the bed and, to everyone's surprise, held Beatrice's free hand with her small, dirty one. Mummy said Grandma kept a very heavy secret in her heart, and that it was making her sick inside. She tried to help, but the secret was too big for the little plants to cure alone. The way the girl spoke about such complex matters with such simplicity was both fascinating and disturbing. Carmen decided she needed to take control of the situation. Mr. Vance, I need to make some calls. First to Dr. Albright to examine Mrs. Beatrice, and then to Child Protective Services to handle the girl's situation. But before she could leave the room, Beatrice squeezed Iris's hand and said with more strength in her voice, "Don't let her go away. Not yet." "Grandma, you need to rest," Arthur said, worried about the effort Beatrice was making to speak. "It's been a lot for one day." But the old woman shook her head with a determination she hadn't shown in years. "I need to tell about Ilara," she insisted, looking directly into her grandson's eyes, "about what happened to her." Iris, who had been calm until then, suddenly tensed up. "Does Grandma know where my mommy is?" she asked, her small voice filled with hope and fear. Beatrice closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength for a difficult revelation. When she opened them again, There was a deep sadness in her gaze. She stopped coming a few months ago. She was very scared, very confused. She said that someone was after her. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy with these words. Arthur felt a shiver run down his spine. After her? Who was after her, Grandma? But Beatrice had tired again, and her head drooped slightly back onto the pillow. Her breathing became more paced, and for a terrible moment, Arthur feared she had returned to her previous state. Iris, noticing what was happening, gently placed the frog back in Beatrice's hand. The amphibian remained motionless, and gradually the old woman's breathing normalized. "She's just tired," the girl explained. "Waking up after so long is like running a very long race. She needs to rest to get strong again." Carmen watched everything with a mixture of professional amazement and motherly concern. "Iris, you'll stay here while I sort some things out, okay?" she said gently. "You can't sleep in the cemetery anymore. That's no place for a child." The girl nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on Beatrice. "Can I stay with Grandma until she wakes up again?" Iris asked. "Rune likes to take care of sick people. That's what he's for." Arthur looked at this strange child who had appeared out of nowhere and completely changed his reality in a matter of minutes. She spoke of cures and medicinal plants with the naturalness of an experienced healer, carried a frog as if it were a medical instrument, and had woken his grandmother from a coma that doctors considered irreversible. "Carmen," he said finally, "let me take the girl with me today. Temporarily, until we resolve her situation. I can't let her go back to the cemetery, and I need to understand what's happening here." The director hesitated, knowing there were protocols to follow, but the situation was too unique to be handled conventionally. "All right," she agreed after a few seconds. "But tomorrow we need to sort everything out officially, and you will have to sign some papers, assuming temporary responsibility." Arthur nodded, still processing the magnitude of what had happened. In one afternoon, his life had completely changed. His grandmother had awakened from a coma, a mysterious child had appeared with inexplicable powers, and now he was taking responsibility for someone he didn't even know existed. As they left the nursing home, Iris held Arthur's hand firmly with a confidence that surprised him. "Thank you for letting me stay," she said, looking up at him with those big, serious eyes. "Grandma will be fine now, but there's still a lot she needs to tell you." The girl's words echoed in Arthur's mind as they walked toward the car, leaving behind a nursing home where the impossible had just happened. Arthur's house in the Oakwood Hills neighborhood was too quiet when they arrived late in the afternoon. For 2 years, only the echo of his own footsteps had filled the spacious rooms, and now, suddenly, he had a 4-year-old child holding a frog, observing everything with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see far beyond what should be possible for someone so young. Iris entered the living room and immediately went to the large window overlooking the backyard, where a few fruit trees vied for space with a poorly maintained garden that Valerie had abandoned when she left. "This house has sad plants," Iris commented, pressing her face against the glass. "They are asking for help, but no one is listening." Arthur stopped in the middle of the room, watching. The girl with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. How could she know about the plants? How could a child who lived on the streets have knowledge of gardening? And why did everything she say sound like it came from a very ancient wisdom? "Are you hungry?" he asked, trying to focus on the basics. It was obvious the girl hadn't been eating properly for some time. Her little arms were too thin, and her dirty clothes looked like they had been worn for weeks. "I can make you something to eat." Iris turned to him, still holding the frog, against her chest, and smiled for the first time since she had appeared at the nursing home. It was a sweet, genuine smile that completely transformed her face. "Can I feed Rune first?" she asked. "He likes small insects and fresh water. Then I'll eat anything that doesn't hurt animals." The last part of the sentence caught Arthur by surprise. A 4-year-old child concerned about a diet that wouldn't harm animals? Another peculiarity on a list that was already getting too long to be a coincidence. Arthur took her to the backyard, where there was a small ornamental fish pond he had built years ago, when he still had hopes that the house would be filled with the laughter of children. Iris crouched by the pond and carefully placed the frog on the edge. "Rune, you can drink some water here, but don't eat the little fish, okay? They are our friends too." To Arthur's amazement, the frog actually seemed to understand, moving to the water and drinking without showing any interest in the colorful fish swimming nearby. "How did you teach him to do that?" Arthur asked, crouching beside Iris. The girl looked at him with that disconcerting seriousness that seemed to be her trademark. "I didn't teach him. Mummy said that when we truly respect animals, they understand what we need. Rune chose to stay with me because he knew I would need him to help sick people." While they watched the frog, Iris suddenly pointed to one of the fruit trees in the back of the yard. "That mango tree is sick," she said. "There's a part of the trunk that's hurt inside. If we don't take care of it, it will die before next summer." Arthur looked at the tree, which to him seemed perfectly normal. The leaves were green. There were some small mangoes starting to grow, nothing to indicate disease. "How do you know that?" he asked, genuinely curious now. Iris got up and walked to the tree, placing her small hand on the trunk. "It's too warm here," she explained, touching a specific area, "and if you listen very closely, you can hear that something isn't right inside." Arthur approached and, following the girl's example, placed his hand on the same spot. To his surprise, there really was a difference in the temperature of the bark. "Mummy taught me to listen to implants," Iris continued, moving her hand to different points on the trunk, as if she were performing a medical examination. "They talk differently from animals and people, but if we know how to listen, they tell us when they're suffering." There was something in the way she spoke, an absolute naturalness that made Arthur believe every word, no matter how impossible it seemed. When they went back inside, Arthur prepared a cheese sandwich and a glass of milk for Iris, who ate with the delicacy of someone not used to regular meals, savoring each bite as if it were a treasure. "This house used to be happier," she commented between bites. "You can feel that there were more people here and that they liked each other." "How do you know that?" Arthur asked, sitting across from her at the kitchen table. Iris stopped chewing and looked around the room. "Houses hold the emotions of the people who live in them," she explained simply. "This one has good memories mixed with sadness. Someone you loved very much went away and left you with a broken heart." The accuracy of the observation left Arthur speechless. How could a child who had just met him perceive something so intimate about his life? "My wife left me 2 years ago," he admitted, surprised at himself for sharing this with a stranger. "Since then, it's been hard to find joy in anything." "That's why you were so happy when Grandma woke up," Iris said, finishing her sandwich. "It had been a long time since you saw a miracle happen." She got up from the chair and approached a shelf where Arthur kept some old photos. "Can I see the pictures of your family?" she asked, pointing to the photo frames. Arthur hesitated for a moment, but then took a few photos and showed them to her. One was of him with Valerie on their wedding day, another was of Beatrice when she was younger, and there was an old black and white photo showing his grandparents when they were young. "This is Grandpa Joshua," he explained, pointing to the tall man with a mustache in the old photo. "He died when I was a child." Iris studied the photo with an intensity that made Arthur uncomfortable. "He had secrets," she said finally, handing the photo back. "Secrets that left people hurt. Grandma Beatrice knows about these secrets, and that's why she got sick." The way the girl talked about people she had never met, with details she shouldn't know, was starting to scare Arthur. "Iris, where did you really come from?" he asked, crouching to her level. "How do you know all these things about my family?" The girl looked him in the eyes with that ancient seriousness that was becoming familiar. "Mommy Alara told me some things about Grandma Beatrice's family," she said carefully. "She said she had an old connection to you all, and that one day I would understand why." Iris's words made something click in Arthur's mind. Ilara, that name kept echoing in his memory, as if it were important, but he couldn't place it. "Has your mother been to my house before?" he asked. Iris shook her head. "She never came in, but sometimes she would stand across the street watching. She said this house had an energy she recognized, but that it was dangerous to get too close." At that moment the phone rang, interrupting the conversation. It was Carmen, from the nursing home. "Mr. Vance, Dr. Albright came to examine Mrs. Beatrice, and he's asking to speak with you urgently. The tests he ran, well, he said what's happening to her is impossible." Carmen's voice was filled with concern and confusion. "Impossible how?" Arthur asked, watching Iris, who had picked up the frog and was whispering something in its ear. "Dr. Albright said that all her neurological indicators have improved drastically in a matter of hours. This simply doesn't happen in cases of patients who have been in a vegetative state for so long. He wants to know exactly what happened in the room today." Arthur looked at Iris, who was now playing quietly with Rune on the kitchen floor, humming a soft melody that sounded familiar, but he couldn't identify. How could he explain to a doctor that a mysterious child with a frog had cured his grandmother with methods he himself didn't understand? How could he tell him that this same child seemed to know secrets about his family that he himself was unaware of? "Can Dr. Albright wait until tomorrow?" he asked. "I need more time to understand the situation before I talk to him." Carmen hesitated on the other end of the line. "He was very insistent, but I can try to convince him to wait until tomorrow morning. But Mr. Vance, Mrs. Beatrice is asking to speak with you. She's much more alert now and seems to have important things to tell you." After hanging up, Arthur sat in the kitchen chair and watched Iris, who continued to hum that strange melody. "Iris, tomorrow we're going back to see Grandma Beatrice. Do you think she'll continue to get better?" The girl stopped singing and looked at him with a serious expression. "She'll get better, but she'll also get sadder," Iris said, her words laden with a disturbing wisdom. "Because when people wake up, after sleeping for a long time, they remember all the things they tried to forget, and Grandma has many heavy memories waiting for her." The way Iris spoke about complex emotions and psychological situations she shouldn't comprehend made Arthur realize that this would not be a normal night's sleep. Many questions needed answers, and he had a feeling that the next day's revelations would change his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The night came faster than Arthur had expected, bringing with it a strange atmosphere that hung over the house. Iris had taken a bath, a revealing experience that showed several small scars on her arms and legs, evidence of a hard life on the streets, and was now wearing an old t-shirt of his that served as a dress. She was sitting on the living room floor, with the frog Rune beside her, drawing on a piece of paper Arthur had found on his desk. "What are you drawing?" he asked, sitting on the sofa to watch her better. Iris held up the sheet, revealing a surprisingly detailed drawing for a child her age. It showed plants, intertwined roots, and small human figures that seemed to be healed by leaves and flowers. "These are the plants Mommy taught me about," she explained. "Each one has a different power to help people." Arthur looked at the drawing more closely and was impressed by the precision of the details. Iris had drawn specific species of plants. Some he recognized from the local Georgian flora, others completely unknown to him. "Did your mother really know about medicinal plants?" he asked. "How did she learn these things?" "Mommy said she learned from her family," Iris replied. picking up a green-colored pencil to add more detail to the leaves. She said it was very old knowledge, passed down from mother to daughter for many generations, but she also said that our family had scattered and that many people had forgotten who they were. The way the girl talked about family lineages and ancient traditions was disconcerting for someone so young. "And she taught you these things about healing?" Arthur continued, fascinated despite his natural skepticism. Iris nodded, pointing to different plants in the drawing. "This one is for stomach aches," she explained, indicating a plant with serrated leaves. "This other one helps when people are very sad for a long time. And this, anamis," she pointed to a yellow flower, "is for waking up memories that are sleeping." Iris's words made Arthur think of his grandmother. Was it possible that Ilara had really been treating Beatrice with medicinal plants? And if so, why had his grandmother never mentioned it? "Iris, did your mother ever tell you why she visited my grandmother in secret?" The girl stopped drawing and was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower, almost a whisper. "Mommy said that Grandma Beatrice knew something very important about our family. Something that could explain why I can do what I do." She looked at Rune, who was sitting perfectly still beside her. "She said that when I grew up, I would understand the truth about who I am." Before Arthur could ask another question, the doorbell rang. He frowned, checking the clock on the wall. It was almost 9 at night, too late for social visits. When he opened the door, he was shocked to see Valerie standing on the threshold, wearing an expensive coat and carrying a travel bag. His ex-wife looked different, thinner, with shorter hair, and there was something in her eyes he couldn't immediately identify. "Arthur," she said, her voice controlled but tense, "I need to talk to you about the child." He felt his stomach clench. How could she know about Iris? They hadn't spoken in months, and he hadn't told anyone about the day's events. "How did you know?" he asked, instinctively blocking the entrance. "I got a call from Carmen at the nursing home," Valerie explained, trying to look over his shoulder into the house. "She told me what happened with Mrs. Beatrice and about the girl you took home. I came from Atlanta as soon as I heard." There was something in the urgency with which she had traveled that made Arthur uncomfortable. Valerie had never shown any particular interest in his family, and now she was showing up unannounced because of a child she didn't even know. "Valerie, I don't understand why this concerns you," he said, keeping the door partially closed. "You left this house, remember? You left me and my entire family." But his ex-wife gently pushed the door and entered uninvited, as she used to do when they were married. "Arthur, you don't understand the gravity of the situation," she said, looking around the room until her eyes landed on Iris, who had stopped drawing and was watching the woman with a strange expression. "A child with these abilities can't just live with anyone. She needs specialized care from people who understand what she is." "What do you mean, what she is?" Arthur asked, feeling a growing anger. "She's a 4-year-old child who needed help." But Valerie wasn't paying attention to him. Her eyes were fixed on Iris, and there was something in the way she looked at the girl that made Arthur position himself protectively between them. Iris stood up slowly, still holding the frog, and walked to where the adults were talking. "You smell like bad people," she said to Valerie, her voice small but clear. "You have lies inside you, and they make a sour smell." The girl's direct and devastating observation made Valerie take a step back. "Arthur, you see," Valerie said, trying to maintain her composure, "she's not normal. She needs professional help, not from someone who doesn't even know what they're dealing with." But Iris wasn't finished. She moved a little closer and tilted her head, as if studying Valerie. "You know someone named Ilara," Iris said, and it was as if a bomb had exploded in the room. Valerie visibly paled, and Arthur saw something that looked like panic flash in her eyes. "You know where my mother is," the girl continued, her voice growing firmer. You know why she can't come home. I don't know what you're talking about, Valerie said quickly, but her voice trembled. I've never heard that name. Arthur watched the exchange with growing alarm. There was something happening here that was far beyond what he could understand. How could Iris know that Valerie knew Ilara, and why was his ex-wife obviously lying? Valerie, he said slowly, do you know Iris's mother? His ex-wife looked between him and the girl, clearly struggling with a difficult decision. Arthur, there are things about your family that you don't know, she said finally. Things your grandmother hid from you for years. What kind of things, he asked, feeling the world start to spin uncontrollably again. First, his grandmother had miraculously awakened. Then a mysterious child had appeared with impossible knowledge, and now his ex-wife was involved in some way he didn't comprehend. Ilara is your cousin, Valerie said abruptly, the illegitimate daughter of your grandfather Joshua. Beatrice always knew, but she kept it a secret out of shame for the family. The revelation hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. Iris was his relative? The girl who had healed his grandmother was family? Iris, who had listened to everything attentively, suddenly smiled. That's why Rune brought me to you, she said, as if everything finally made sense. He knew I needed to find my real family. But her smile faded as she looked at Valerie again. But you don't want me to stay here. You want to take me away. It's for your own good, Valerie said, trying to sound motherly but failing completely. There are people who can help you better, who understand your abilities. Arthur felt a fury he hadn't experienced in years. Everything was fitting together in a disturbing way. Valerie's sudden appearance, her knowledge of Iris, her insistence on taking the girl away. You're not touching her, he said, his voice low but laden with threat. I don't know what you're plotting, but Iris stays here. Valerie looked at him with an expression that mixed frustration and something that seemed like desperation. Arthur, you don't understand what's at stake here, she said. This girl isn't just special, she's valuable, and there are people who know about her, people who will come after her. Valerie's words made Iris move closer to Arthur, holding onto the hem of his shirt with a small, trembling hand. What people? He asked, instinctively picking Iris up. What are you talking about? But Valerie was already heading for the door, clearly realizing she had revealed more than she intended. Be careful, Arthur, she said before leaving. You're both in danger now. And with those ominous words, she disappeared into the night, leaving Arthur and Iris alone in a house that suddenly felt much less safe than before. The next morning arrived with a stuffy heat typical of a Georgia March, but Arthur had barely slept. Valerie's words echoed in his mind like a constant alarm. There are people who know about her, people who will come after her. Iris had slept peacefully in the guest room, with Rune in a small box beside the bed. But Arthur had spent the dawn checking windows and doors, a paranoia he hadn't felt in years taking over his thoughts. When they arrived at St. Vincent's nursing home in the morning, Dr. Evan Albright was waiting for them with a grave expression. He was a tall man with graying hair and reading glasses hanging around his neck, known in Cedar Creek for his competence as a neurologist, but also for his professional coldness. He observed Iris with the clinical interest of someone trying to solve an impossible medical puzzle. Mr. Vance, I need to understand exactly what happened yesterday, Dr. Albright said, leading them to a private room. Your grandmother's tests show improvements that defy everything we know about neurology. Brain activity that had been dormant for 3 years simply returned to normal in a matter of hours. He looked directly at Iris. And I have information that this child was present during the recovery. Iris held Arthur's hand tighter, her large eyes watching the doctor with a caution she hadn't shown before. He doesn't believe in the old cures, she murmured, soft enough for only Arthur to hear. He thinks only lab-made medicines can help people. Doctor, Arthur said, choosing his words carefully, my grandmother improved after Iris visited her. I can't explain how or why, but that's what happened. Dr. Albright made notes on his clipboard, clearly skeptical of any explanation that didn't involve conventional medicine. Mr. Vance, I understand that in moments of family desperation, we tend to seek unconventional alternatives, but I need you to understand that what you're describing is medically impossible. The doctor turned to Iris. Child, what exactly did you do when you visited the lady in the bed? Iris looked at Arthur, who nodded encouragingly. I put rune on Grandma's forehead and asked him to show where the sadness was that kept her asleep, she explained with her usual naturalness. Mommy taught me that some illnesses aren't in the body, they're in the heart, and when you heal the heart, the body gets well too. Dr. Albright stopped writing and looked at the girl with a mixture of condescension and irritation. Child, animals don't have healing powers, and neurological diseases are not caused by sadness. But Iris shook her head with a determination that surprised the doctor. You don't listen properly, she said, her voice small but firm. Grandma wasn't just sick in her brain. She was sick from holding a very heavy secret. When the secret starts to come out, she'll get even better. Dr. Albright looked at Arthur with an expression that clearly questioned the child's sanity. Just then, a nurse rushed into the room. Dr. Albright, Mrs. Beatrice is asking to speak with her grandson. She's very agitated and won't take her medication until she talks to him. The doctor sighed, putting his clipboard away. Let's go see your grandmother, but I want you to understand that any improvement you observe may be temporary. Cases like hers often show fluctuations. When they entered room 237, Arthur was struck by Beatrice's transformation. She was sitting up in bed, completely alert, her eyes shining with a lucidity he hadn't seen in years. When she saw Iris, her face lit up with a genuine smile. My dear girl, she said, stretching out her arms, you came back. Iris ran to the bed and let the old woman hug her, Rune leaping from her arms to the bedside table where he watched everything with his bulging eyes. How is Grandma feeling today? The girl asked, nestling into Beatrice's hug as if they had been family for a long time. Much better, my child, but also more worried, Beatrice replied, looking meaningfully at Arthur. I need to tell you important things I've kept for too long. Dr. Albright observed the interaction with scientific fascination, making mental notes about the patient's exceptional lucidity. Grandma, yesterday you mentioned Ilara, Iris's mother, Arthur said, pulling a chair closer. And Valerie showed up at the house saying Ilara was my cousin. Is that true? Beatrice closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength for a difficult confession. It's true, my grandson, she said finally. Your grandfather Joshua had a relationship with a woman named Annabelle in the 1990s. Ilara is their daughter. The revelation, even though Valerie had already mentioned it, still hit Arthur hard. Why did you never tell me? Because Joshua made me promise I would never tell anyone, Beatrice replied, tears starting to stream down her face. He said it would destroy our family if the truth came out. He sent Annabelle out of town when he found out she was pregnant, and I stayed silent like a coward. Iris, who had listened to everything attentively, held Beatrice's hand. Grandma isn't a coward. Grandma was protecting the family the way she knew how. Her words brought a visible comfort to the old woman, who squeezed the child's small hand gratefully. But there's more, Arthur, Beatrice continued, her voice growing stronger. Ilara came back to Cedar Creek a few years ago. She had found out about our family and wanted to meet her relatives. She started coming here to the nursing home in secret, bringing me plants and doing natural treatments. Dr. Albright leaned forward, interested despite his skepticism. What kind of treatments? The doctor asked. Beatrice looked at him with an expression that mixed defiance and sadness. Doctor, you may not believe it, but Ilara had a gift. She could perceive illnesses that doctors couldn't see, and her plants really helped people. Mrs. Beatrice, with all due respect, that's superstition, Dr. Albright said. There's no scientific basis for... But he was interrupted when Iris suddenly turned to him with those penetrating eyes. You have a pain in your back that started after you fell off your bike last month, she said calmly, and you're afraid to go to the doctor because you don't want to find out it might be something serious. Dr. Albright visibly paled. He had indeed fallen off his bike recently, and he had indeed been feeling back pains that worried him. How did you... Who told you that? He asked, clearly shaken. Iris pointed to Rune. He showed me. Amphibians feel people's illnesses through their skin. It's an old gift that not everyone has anymore. Beatrice took advantage of the doctor's shocked silence to continue her revelation. Arthur, Ilara visited me regularly until about 6 months ago. Then suddenly, she stopped showing up. When I asked one of the nurses, I learned that a woman had been admitted to the municipal psychiatric clinic after a strange accident. What kind of accident? Arthur asked, a cold feeling in his stomach. Beatrice looked directly into his eyes. She was found in the Cedar Creek River, nearly drowned, with no memory of who she was or how she got there. When I heard about it, I tried to visit her, but they wouldn't let me in. They said she was in a very delicate state. Iris, who had been quiet during this part of the conversation, suddenly began to tremble. Mommy is in the place with the dirty water, she murmured, her eyes filling with tears. She can't remember who I am. The pain in the girl's voice was devastating, and Arthur instinctively picked her up. Iris, we're going to find... Your mom, he promised. We'll bring her back. But Dr. Albright, who had recovered from his initial shock, shook his head gravely. If she's admitted to the psychiatric clinic with amnesia, the situation is very complicated, he said. Patients in these conditions often don't recognize even close family. It would be traumatic for a child to witness that. His words made Iris cry harder, and Arthur felt a growing anger at the circumstances that had separated mother and daughter. Doctor, Beatrice said firmly, this child has been through enough trauma. If there's a chance to reconnect her with her mother, we need to try. Dr. Albright looked between the determined old woman, the protective man, and the crying child, clearly struggling with medical protocols and human compassion. At that moment, the room door opened, and Carmen entered with a worried expression. Mr. Vance, there's a social worker here who needs to speak with you about Iris. She said she received a report that a child is being kept irregularly at your home. Arthur's heart sank. Valerie had carried out her threat. The social worker waiting in the nursing home's reception was a severe-looking woman with black hair tied in a tight bun and thick-framed glasses that gave her an intimidating air. Nora Sampson, as she introduced herself, carried a bulky folder and had the cold gaze of someone who had seen many complicated family situations. When Arthur went down to meet her, leaving Iris in the room with Beatrice, he could feel the tension in the air even before she opened her mouth. "Mr. Arthur Vance?" she asked, consulting her papers. "We received a report that you are keeping a minor in your residence without proper legal authorization." Her words were direct and accusatory, instantly making Arthur feel like a criminal. "I need to assess the conditions in which this child is being kept and determine if it's necessary to remove her to a temporary foster home." "Nora, the situation isn't quite like that," Arthur tried to explain, struggling to stay calm. "The girl showed up here yesterday, clearly abandoned and in need of care. I just offered temporary shelter until we could find a suitable solution." But the social worker shook her head, making notes on her clipboard. "Mr. Vance, regardless of good intentions, there is a legal protocol for these situations. A child cannot simply be taken in by a stranger without prior assessment and judicial authorization. She looked around the nursing home with disapproval. And according to the report I received, there are indications that this child may have special needs that require specialized care. What kind of report? Arthur asked, though he already knew the answer. Who made this accusation? Nora consulted her papers again. A woman named Valerie Costa-Vance, who identified herself as your ex-wife. She claims to have knowledge that the child has behavioral disorders that could pose a risk to both herself and others. The anger Arthur felt at that moment was so intense he had to lean against the wall to keep from exploding. Valerie had completely twisted the situation, turning Iris's unique gifts into symptoms of mental illness. Nora, my ex-wife has no authority to make this kind of report. We've been divorced for 2 years, and she has no involvement in my current life. Still, she provided detailed information about the child's anomalous behaviors, the social worker continued. Allegations that she claims to have supernatural abilities, that she keeps wild animals as company, and that she demonstrates knowledge inappropriate for her age. Every word Nora spoke sounded like a cruel distortion of the reality Arthur had witnessed. At that moment, small footsteps echoed down the stairs, and Iris appeared in the reception area, carrying Rune and with a worried look on her face. Uncle Arthur, Grandma Beatrice said there's a woman here who wants to take me away, she said, approaching him hesitantly, her large eyes fixed on Nora with instinctive caution. You must be Iris, the social worker said, crouching to the girl's level but maintaining a professional distance. My name is Nora, and I'm here to talk to you about where you've been living. Iris hid behind Arthur, watching the woman with suspicion. She doesn't like children, Iris murmured, soft enough for only Arthur to hear. She thinks all children are problems to be solved, not people to be cared for. The girl's insightful observation made Arthur realize she had immediately identified Nora's professional coldness. Iris, can I see what you're holding? The social worker asked, pointing to Rune. That animal could pose health risks. Amphibians can carry diseases. Iris clutched the frog defensively against her chest. Rune isn't sick. He's my friend and helps me take care of people who are suffering. Nora made more notes, clearly interpreting Iris's response as confirmation of the behavioral disorders mentioned in the report. Iris, where did you sleep last night? Did anyone hurt you or make you feel uncomfortable? The questions were part of the standard protocol, but the way they were asked sounded accusatory to Arthur. I slept in the softest bed I've ever had, Iris answered honestly. Uncle Arthur gave me yummy food and let me take a bath with warm water. Nobody hurt me. But Nora continued her assessment, asking to see the accommodations where Iris had slept. When they arrived at Arthur's house, an hour later, Nora inspected every room with the rigor of a criminal investigation. She photographed the room where Iris had slept, examined the refrigerator to check for adequate food for a child, and made notes on the general condition of the residence. The house is in adequate condition, she admitted, but that doesn't resolve the issue of irregular custody. Nora, may I ask what the alternative would be? Arthur questioned, watching Iris play quietly in the yard with Rune. If you take this child, where will she go? To a shelter with dozens of other children, where no one will understand her specific needs? The social worker stopped writing and looked at him with an expression that mixed professional compassion with bureaucratic resignation. Mr. Vance, I understand your concern, but we have trained foster families to deal with children with special needs, she said, and there's also the matter of finding the child's biological relatives. According to our records, there's no documentation for this girl in the system. And what if I told you we found her mother? Arthur asked, playing his last card. That she's admitted to the municipal psychiatric clinic and we're trying to reunite mother and daughter. Nora raised an eyebrow, interested but skeptical. Are you sure about that? Because if it's true, a complete psychological evaluation of the mother would be necessary before any reunion, she explained. Mothers with psychiatric problems are not always suitable to care for children, especially children with the peculiarities of this girl. At that moment, the doorbell rang again, and Arthur felt his stomach clench when he saw Valerie at the door, accompanied by a man he didn't know. He was an elegantly dressed man with an expensive suit and an air of authority that immediately put Arthur on high alert. "Arthur, this is Dr. Maurice Castle, a specialist in children with special abilities," Valerie announced with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Vance," the man said, extending a hand with a cordiality that seemed rehearsed, "I've come to assess the situation of the child under your care. I understand she demonstrates unusual abilities." Arthur didn't shake the extended hand, instinctively distrusting anyone Valerie brought to his house. "Doctor, the child is well cared for here," Nora said, intervening in the conversation. "Although there are legal issues regarding custody, there is no evidence of neglect or abuse." But Dr. Castle shook his head with an expression of professional concern. "Ms. Sampson, I don't think you understand the complexity of the situation," he said, pulling some papers from his briefcase. "Children with prematurely developed psychic abilities often suffer from severe emotional instability if they don't receive proper treatment. It's a matter of public safety." "Psychic abilities," Nora repeated, clearly confused. "What exactly are you talking about?" It was then that Iris entered through the back door from the yard and immediately went to Arthur when she saw the strangers in the room. "You keep coming back," she said to Valerie, her voice small but firm. "And now you've brought someone who wants to study me like I'm an insect." She looked directly at Dr. Castle. "You don't want to help me. You want to find out how I do what I do to use other children like me." The silence that followed was tense and revealing. Dr. Castle had paled slightly at Iris's direct observation, and Valerie looked nervous in a way Arthur had never seen before. "Little girl," the doctor said, trying to sound paternal, "no one wants to hurt you. We just want to understand your gifts to help you develop them properly." "My gifts don't need to be developed," Iris replied, holding Arthur's hand. "They need to be protected. Mommy taught me that there are bad people who want to use children like us to do things that hurt other people." The way she spoke, with a wisdom that went far beyond her 4 years, made all the adults present uncomfortable for different reasons. Nora watched the interaction with growing confusion and concern. "Can someone please explain to me exactly what we're talking about here? What kind of special abilities does this child supposedly possess?" Arthur realized it was time to take a definitive stand, even if it meant facing legal consequences. "Nora, this child healed my grandmother from a vegetative state that had lasted 3 years, he said, looking directly into the social worker's eyes. "She has knowledge of natural medicine she shouldn't possess, and she demonstrates a perception of people that goes beyond normal. And now my ex-wife shows up with a specialist, wanting to take her away to study her as if she were a science experiment." The tension in Arthur's living room had become almost palpable when Nora Sampson made a decision that surprised everyone. "Dr. Castle, I need official documentation of your specialization and credentials for working with minors," she said, her voice taking on a more authoritative tone. "And Mrs. Valerie, I need to understand exactly what your legal interest is in this child, considering there is no established kinship." Valerie exchanged a quick glance with Dr. Castle, and Arthur immediately realized something was wrong with the dynamic between them. "Nora, my interest is purely humanitarian," Valerie said, but her voice had lost its previous confidence. "This child needs specialized care that my ex-husband cannot provide." "Humanitarian?" Iris repeated, her small voice cutting through the adults' conversation. You lied when you said you didn't know my mother, and he, she pointed to Dr. Castle, smells like medicine that makes people forget who they are. The girl's observation made Dr. Castle take a step back, clearly uncomfortable. Little girl, you have a very active imagination, he said, trying to sound professional, but Arthur noticed a drop of sweat on his forehead despite the air conditioning. It's normal for children who have been through trauma to create elaborate fantasies, but Iris shook her head energetically. You know my mother, she said, looking directly at Dr. Castle. You're the doctor who makes her take medicine so she won't remember me. The silence that followed was deafening. Nora looked between Dr. Castle and Valerie with growing suspicion, while Arthur felt all the pieces of a macabre puzzle begin to fit together. Dr. Castle, Nora said slowly, do you work at the municipal psychiatric clinic? The doctor hesitated for a very long moment before answering. Yes, I'm a consultant on some special cases, he admitted, clearly realizing he had revealed more than he intended. But that has no bearing on the current situation. Yes, it does, Arthur said, a cold fury taking over his voice. You're treating this child's mother, and now you want to take the daughter too. What kind of study are you conducting? Dr. Castle opened his mouth to protest, but was interrupted by an event that completely changed the course of the conversation. Rune, who had been quiet in Iris's lap, suddenly leaped and rushed toward Valerie. To everyone's astonishment, the frog climbed up the woman's leg and positioned itself on her shoulder, remaining completely still, as if it were performing some kind of reading. Valerie tried to swat it away, but Iris stopped her with a gesture. Let him finish, the girl said, watching the frog intently. He's finding out the truth about you. After a few seconds that felt like an eternity, Rune jumped back to Iris, who held him to her chest and closed her eyes, as if processing telepathically received information. When she opened her eyes, tears were streaming down her face. You were there when my mother fell in the water, she said to Valerie, her voice trembling with emotion. You pushed her because she was going to tell Uncle Arthur about who I really am. The accusation exploded in the room like a bomb, and Valerie turned visibly pale. That's ridiculous, she said, but her voice was shaky. A traumatized child making up fantasy stories. But Nora was now watching Valerie with professional eyes trained to detect lies. Mrs. Valerie, where were you on the night Ilara was found in the river? I was in Atlanta, Valerie stammered. Working. You can check. But Iris shook her head sadly. You came back to Cedar Creek because you heard Mommy was trying to find our family. You were afraid she would tell about Grandpa Joshua and about me. Dr. Castle, realizing the situation was getting completely out of control, tried to intervene. Nora, I believe it would be best to continue this conversation in a more formal setting. The child is clearly disturbed and creating fantasy narratives. But the social worker now had a completely different look on the situation. Dr. Castle, I need you to accompany me for an official conversation about the treatment protocols for Ilara Santos at the psychiatric clinic, she said with authority. And Mrs. Valerie, I also need clarification on your presence in Cedar Creek during the mentioned period. It was obvious that Nora had noticed the inconsistencies in the story she had been told. Arthur, Valerie said desperately, you're not going to believe the fantasies of a disturbed child, are you? But Arthur looked at her with a coldness she had never seen before. Valerie, during 15 years of marriage, I learned to recognize when you were lying. And right now, you're lying about a 4-year-old child and her sick mother. At that moment, Arthur's phone rang. It was Carmen from the nursing home with urgent news. Mr. Vance, Mrs. Beatrice is asking to speak with you immediately. She says she remembered something very important about Ilara and that it can't wait. The urgency in Carmen's voice made Arthur realize his grandmother had remembered something crucial. Nora, "I need to go to the nursing home to see my grandmother," he said, picking Iris up. "But I don't want to leave these people alone in my house." The social worker nodded, understanding the situation. "I'll accompany you. Dr. Castle and Mrs. Valerie will come with us too. I think Mrs. Beatrice may have important information to clarify this situation." During the drive to St. Vincent's nursing home, Iris remained quiet in Arthur's lap, but he could feel she was processing intense emotions. "Iris, are you okay?" he whispered. The girl looked at him with those big, serious eyes. "Rune showed me many things about the bad woman. She hurt my mommy because she was afraid of a secret about our family." "What kind of secret?" he asked, but Iris shook her head. "I can't say yet. Grandma Beatrice has to tell first. It's her story to tell." The maturity with which the girl handled complex situations continued to impress Arthur, even amidst all the emotional turmoil. When they arrived at the nursing home, they found Beatrice sitting up in bed, completely alert, with a determined expression Arthur hadn't seen in years. Dr. Albright was by her side, taking notes, clearly fascinated by the patient's inexplicable recovery. "Arthur, my grandson," she said when she saw him enter, "did you bring the people who needed to be here?" "I did, Grandma," he replied, watching as Beatrice's eyes fixed on Valerie with an almost frightening intensity. "You said you remembered something important about Ilara." Beatrice nodded, but continued to stare at Valerie with an expression that mixed sadness and disappointment. "Valerie," the old woman said, her voice heavy with emotion, "you knew about Ilara from the beginning, didn't you?" The direct question made Valerie recoil, but she was cornered in the small room with several people watching her. "Mrs. Beatrice, I don't know what you're talking about." "You were my husband's mistress," Beatrice continued, ignoring the denial. "Joshua told me before he died that he'd had an affair with you in the 1990s, around the same time he got Annabelle pregnant. You always knew about Ilara, and when she showed up in Cedar Creek looking for her family, you were afraid she would discover the truth about her parentage." The revelation hit the room like a hurricane. Arthur looked at Valerie with growing horror, realizing that his ex-wife had hidden secrets about his family throughout their entire marriage. "Valerie, is this true?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Arthur, I can explain," she said, but her words sounded empty now. "It was complicated. Joshua made me promise I would never tell." But Beatrice hadn't finished her revelation. "There's more, my grandson," she said, now looking at Iris with tenderness. "Ilara isn't just your cousin. Based on the timeline and the dates she told me when she used to visit—" Beatrice paused, taking a deep breath. "Arthur, you and Ilara are siblings, children of the same father." The world seemed to stop around Arthur. If Ilara was his sister, then Iris was his niece. The child he had taken in out of compassion was his own blood, and Valerie had tried to tear apart a family that didn't even know it existed. "Grandma, are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I am, my son," Beatrice replied, tears streaming down her face. "And that's why Valerie did what she did to Ilara. She knew that if the truth came out, you would find out she had hidden the existence of your sister throughout your entire marriage." The magnitude of the betrayal was slowly revealing itself, and Arthur felt as if he were seeing his entire life in a new light. Iris, who had listened to everything in silence, suddenly smiled through her tears. "I knew we were real family," she said, hugging Arthur. "Rune brought me home." The hours following Beatrice's revelation were a whirlwind of emotions and bureaucracy that Arthur had never imagined facing. Nora Sampson had taken control of the situation with professional efficiency, separating Dr. Castle and Valerie for individual questioning while organizing an official visit to the municipal psychiatric clinic. The discovery that Iris was his niece had completely changed the legal perspective on custody, but it had also brought to light the urgency of finding Ilara. "Uncle Arthur," Iris said for the 10th time that afternoon, testing the new words that now made complete sense. "Mommy will be so happy when she finds out I found you." They were sitting in the waiting room of the psychiatric clinic, a cold, institutional environment that smelled of disinfectant and carried the emotional weight of many sad stories. Iris held Rune tighter than usual, clearly nervous about the prospect of seeing her mother again. Dr. Albright, the neurologist who had become interested in Beatrice's case, had offered to accompany them on the visit. His scientific curiosity had been replaced by genuine concern when he learned of the circumstances surrounding Ilara's hospitalization. "Mr. Vance," he said, consulting a folder of medical documents, "I spoke with the colleagues who are caring for your sister, and her case is truly intriguing." "Intriguing how?" Arthur asked, trying to keep his voice calm so as not to alarm Iris, who was listening intently. Dr. Albright hesitated before answering, choosing his words carefully. "Ilara was admitted with complete amnesia after nearly drowning in the Cedar Creek River, but her neurological exams show no evidence of brain trauma to justify the memory loss." "What does that mean?" Arthur asked, a cold feeling in his stomach. Dr. Albright looked around to make sure no one else was listening. "It means the amnesia may have been artificially induced. There are drugs that, when administered incorrectly, can cause temporary memory loss, and Ilara's medication history shows some worrying inconsistencies." Iris, who had been quiet, suddenly raised her head. "The man in the expensive clothes gave my mommy bad medicine," she said, clearly referring to Dr. Castle. "He wanted her to forget me so he could study me without anyone looking for me." The devastating simplicity with which she described the situation made Dr. Albright turn pale. "Iris, are you sure about this?" he asked, crouching to the girl's level. "It's very important that you tell me everything you remember about this man." The girl looked at Rune, as if consulting the frog before answering. "He used to visit our house, secretly before Mommy went away," she said, her words coming out slowly as if it were hard to remember. "He talked about special children like me and about how important it was to study them to understand their gifts. Mommy would get angry and say I wasn't an experiment." At that moment, a nurse approached the group. "Dr. Albright, Dr. Maurice Castle is here and is insisting he needs to evaluate patient Ilara before the family visit." The information made Arthur stand up abruptly. "No," he said firmly, "that man is not getting near my sister." "Mr. Vance, he has valid credentials and a medical order for an evaluation," the nurse explained hesitantly. "I can't stop him without an official counter-order." Dr. Albright stood up, assuming an authoritative professional posture. "I take medical responsibility for this decision. Dr. Castle is under investigation for possible professional misconduct and should not have access to the patient." While the adults resolved bureaucratic issues, Iris approached a window that overlooked a small internal garden of the clinic. "Mommy is in the room, with the window facing the yellow flowers," she said suddenly, pointing to a specific wing of the building. "She looks at them and tries to remember something important." "How do you know that?" Arthur asked, once again impressed by the girl's perception. Iris gently touched Rune. "He can feel where she is. Amphibians feel people's emotions through water, and Mommy is always crying, so there's a lot of salty water around her." After another hour of negotiations and paperwork, they were finally allowed to visit Ilara. Dr. Albright accompanied them, carrying a folder with the patient's true medical records, which he had managed to access through his contacts at the clinic. "Arthur," he said, as they walked down the hallways, "prepare yourself. Your sister may not recognize you initially. The medication she received can have lasting effects." The room where Ilara was staying was small, but clean, with the window Iris had mentioned overlooking a bed of yellow daisies. The woman sitting on the bed was visibly older than Arthur, with greying brown hair and eyes that seemed to carry an immense weight. When she saw them enter, she flinched slightly, clearly uncomfortable with visitors. "Ilara," Dr. Albright said gently, "we've brought some people who would like to meet you." The woman looked at Arthur with vague curiosity, but when her eyes fell on Iris, something in her expression changed. Not immediate recognition, but a restlessness, as if something deep in her memory was being touched. "Mommy," Iris whispered, letting go of Arthur's hand and running to the bed. "It's me, your little girl. I brought Rune to help you remember." Ilara looked at the child with confusion, but her eyes filled with inexplicable tears. Do I know you?" she asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "You used to sing me to sleep," Iris said, climbing onto the bed and snuggling next to her mother with the naturalness of someone who had always belonged there. "You sang about little birds that fly free and about plants that heal sad people." The girl's words provoked a visible reaction in Ilara, who began to tremble slightly. Rune, who had remained quiet until then, suddenly leaped from Iris's lap and positioned himself in Ilara's hand. To everyone's surprise, the woman did not pull away from the amphibian, but stroked it gently, as if it were a familiar gesture. "I used to have a little frog like this," she murmured, a spark of memory shining in her eyes. "He helped me find the right plants to make medicine." "Mommy, this is the same Rune," Iris said, tears streaming down her face. "He stayed with me when you had to go away. He taught me how to take care of sick people, just like you taught me." Ilara looked more closely at the girl, and for the first time since they entered the room, there was something that looked like genuine recognition in her eyes. "Iris," she whispered, the word coming out like a prayer. "My little girl, you've grown so much." The emotion of seeing mother and daughter reconnect was overwhelming for Arthur, who had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. Dr. Albright watched everything with professional fascination, making mental notes about the apparently spontaneous memory recovery. "Ilara," Arthur said finally, approaching the bed. "My name is Arthur. I'm your brother." The woman looked at him with renewed confusion, but there was less fear in her eyes now. "Brother," she repeated. "I have a brother." "Our father was Joshua Vance," Arthur explained gently. "You are his daughter with Annabelle, and I am his son with my mother Clara. Our grandmother Beatrice confirmed it today." Ilara processed this information slowly, her hand still, stroking Rune automatically. "Beatrice," she murmured, and suddenly her eyes lit up. "I used to visit a lady named Beatrice at the nursing home. She was very sick, and I would bring her plants to help her. But something happened. Someone stopped me from continuing to visit her." Her memories were gradually returning, like pieces of a puzzle being put back in place. Dr. Albright approached, interested in the recovery process. "Ilara, do you remember how you got here to the clinic?" The question made the woman frown, concentrating intensely. "There was a woman," she said slowly, "a woman who followed me to the river. She was angry about something, yelling about family secrets, and then water. Lots of water." "The bad woman pushed you," Iris said, holding her mother's hand. "She was afraid you would tell Uncle Arthur about our family. But now everyone knows the truth, and she can't hurt you anymore." Ilara looked between her daughter and her newfound brother, tears of relief and confusion streaming down her face. "I remember you being so little," she said to Iris, gently touching the girl's face, "and I remember being afraid someone would take you from me. That's why, We lived in hiding, always moving from place to place. The memories were reconnecting quickly now, as if the presence of Iris and Rune was a catalyst for her recovery. At that moment, Dr. Albright received an urgent call. After a few minutes of tense conversation, he hung up with a worried expression. "Arthur, we have a problem," he said. "Dr. Castle has obtained a court order to have Iris admitted for compulsory psychological evaluation. He's coming here with court officers." The panic that took hold of Arthur upon hearing about the court order was instantaneous and visceral. The idea of Iris being taken away to be studied like a science experiment by Dr. Castle was unacceptable. "They are not touching her," he said, picking Iris up with fierce determination. "Dr. Albright, is there a back exit to this clinic?" The neurologist immediately understood the gravity of the situation and nodded. "There's an emergency exit at the end of the hall that leads to the employee parking lot," he said quickly. "But Arthur, running away won't solve the problem legally. It will only make the situation worse." Ilara, who had watched the whole conversation with growing alarm, suddenly stood up from the bed with an energy she hadn't shown in months. "They are not taking my daughter again," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I've already lost months of her life because of these people. I won't lose any more." Maternal determination had awakened something deep in Ilara, breaking the last barriers the medication had created in her mind. "Arthur, I need to tell you something that might help us." "Mommy, are you remembering more things?" Iris asked, still in her uncle's arms, but reaching out to touch her mother's face. Ilara nodded, her memories crystallizing with impressive speed. "I remember that Dr. Castle doesn't work alone. He has partners who are interested in children with special abilities. And Valerie, she was involved from the beginning." "Involved how?" Arthur asked, hearing hurried footsteps approaching from the main hallway. Dr. Albright was watching from the window, signaling that they needed to leave immediately. "Valerie knew Joshua long before you did," Ilara explained quickly. "She knew about me since I was born, and when I started looking for the family, she contacted Dr. Castle." "Why?" Arthur insisted, walking towards the emergency exit with Iris in his arms. "What interest could she have in a child she didn't even know existed?" Ilara followed them, showing surprising agility for someone who had been sedated for months. "Because Iris isn't the first child in our family with these gifts." The revelation hit them like a lightning bolt as they descended the emergency stairs. "What?" Arthur asked, almost tripping. "Our family has a lineage of natural healers," Ilara explained, checking if they were being followed. "Joshua had these gifts, as did his mother, my grandmother. Valerie always knew this and wanted to find out how to use these abilities." When they reached the employee parking lot, Dr. Albright guided them to his car. "Where will you go?" he asked, clearly torn between his professional responsibility and his human concern. "I can't officially help you escape, but I can give you a few minutes before I report that you've left." "Doctor," Iris said, looking at him with those big, serious eyes, "you know they'll hurt me if they take me, don't you?" The devastating simplicity of the question made Dr. Albright close his eyes for a moment, wrestling with his professional conscience. "Go to Beatrice's house," he said finally. "She's being transferred home today with home care. There you'll have time to plan a proper legal defense." As they drove through the streets of Cedar Creek, Arthur felt as if he were in a thriller movie that had become his real life. Iris was sitting between him and Ilara in the back seat of the borrowed car, holding Rune and talking quietly with her mother, who continued to recover memories with each passing minute. "Uncle Arthur," Iris said suddenly, "I need to tell you about the others." Arthur looked in the rearview mirror, confused. "What others, honey?" The girl exchanged a meaningful look with Ilara, who nodded encouragingly. "There are other children like me. Dr. Castle has already taken some of them." The car almost veered off the road as Arthur processed what he had heard. "How do you know that?" he asked, parking in a safe spot to have this conversation properly. "Rune tells me," Iris explained, stroking the frog. "He's been to other places with other special children. They're locked up in a place where they run tests on them." Elara confirmed with a grave nod. "It's true, Arthur. Before I was committed, I was investigating the disappearance of at least 3 children in nearby towns. All had abilities similar to Iris's. The magnitude of the situation was revealing itself to be much greater than Arthur had imagined. It wasn't just about protecting his niece, but about exposing an operation that had been harming children for years. "Mommy, do you know where the other children are?" Iris asked, her small voice filled with concern for the others. Elara shook her head sadly. "I was trying to find out when Valerie attacked me at the river, but I have some clues that I hid before I was committed when they arrived at the house where Beatrice had been transferred, a small residence adapted for home medical care. They found the old woman fully alert and waiting for them. Nora Sampson was also there, with a worried expression that intensified when she saw them arriving as clear fugitives. "Arthur, you shouldn't have left the clinic like that," Nora said, but her voice carried no real reproach. "Dr. Castle is furious and is mobilizing resources to find you." Beatrice, observing the whole situation from her adapted bed in the living room, gestured for everyone to approach. "Nora," the old woman said with authority, "I need you to listen to something very important. For all these years, I've kept hidden documents that prove the illegal activities of the people involved in this situation." She pointed to an old dresser in the corner of the room. "In the bottom drawer, behind the old papers, there's a box with evidence that can protect Iris and expose the truth." As Nora opened the indicated drawer, Iris approached Beatrice and held her hand. "Grandma, did you keep these papers because you knew one day I would need them?" The girl's question made Beatrice smile tenderly. "I didn't know specifically about you, my dear, but I knew our family secrets would one day cause trouble, and I wanted to be prepared." The box Nora found contained documents dating back decades, letters from Joshua to Valerie, confirming their secret relationship, documents about Elara's birth and Annabelle's attempts to register the paternity, and most importantly, recent correspondence between Valerie and an organization that identified itself as the Institute for Research of Special Human Capabilities. "My God," Nora murmured, reading the letters. Valerie was providing information about children with unusual abilities to this organization. And there are recorded payments. She was being paid to identify and locate these children. The evidence that Arthur's ex-wife was involved in something much more serious than family jealousy was devastating. "Nora," Elara said, her voice still weak but determined, "the letters mention addresses where the children are being held. We need to check these locations." But before they could plan any action, the sound of cars approaching quickly alerted them that they had been found. "They're here," Iris said calmly, placing Rune on the floor and watching through the window. "But this time I'm not going to hide." There was something different in the girl's posture, a determination that went beyond her 4 years. "Rune showed me something important. It's time to stop running and start fighting." Arthur looked out the window and saw 3 cars parked in front of the house. Dr. Castle in a black sedan, Valerie in her personal car, and an official vehicle with 2 men in suits who clearly represented some kind of authority. "Iris, stay behind me," he said. But the girl shook her head. "Uncle Arthur, they only have power over us if we believe they do," she said, walking toward the front door. "But Grandma Beatrice gave us the proof that they are the real criminals. Now it's time to show everyone who the real villains are." Her confidence was contagious, but Arthur still feared what might happen in the next few minutes. When Dr. Castle knocked on the door, accompanied by the others, it was Iris who answered, holding Arthur's hand, but showing no fear. "Hello, Dr. Castle," she said politely. "We're here to deliver something of yours." The confusion on the doctor's face was evident when Nora appeared behind Iris, carrying the box of documents, and with an expression of professional authority he hadn't seen before. "Dr. Maurice Castle," Nora said officially, "you are being charged with participation in a scheme of kidnapping and exploitation of minors. You have the right to remain silent." The complete reversal of the situation left everyone present in shock, especially Valerie, who turned visibly pale upon realizing her secrets had been discovered. The tense moment that followed Nora's statement was interrupted by the arrival of more vehicles. 2 cars from social services and an unmarked police car parked quickly, revealing that Nora had mobilized support even before confronting Dr. Castle. The operation had been planned with precision, using Beatrice's documents as the basis for an official investigation that had been underway for hours. "This is a misunderstanding," Dr. Castle said, trying to maintain his professional composure, but his voice trembled slightly. "I am a respected doctor with valid credentials. You can't accuse me without concrete evidence." But Valerie, realizing the gravity of the situation, did something that surprised everyone. She ran towards her car, clearly trying to escape. "Don't let her get away!" Iris shouted, and Rune leaped from her arms so quickly it caught everyone off guard. The frog ran directly towards Valerie's feet, causing a spectacular fall that left her immobilized. On the ground as officers approached, "Rune knows who the bad people are," the girl explained calmly. "He was waiting for the right moment to act." While Valerie was being detained, Dr. Castle tried one last desperate maneuver. "Nora, you're making a grave mistake," he said, adopting a threatening tone. "There are much larger forces involved in this situation, influential people who will not tolerate this interference." But Ilara, who had remained quiet until then, stepped forward with a determination that surprised everyone. "Dr. Castle, for months you gave me medication to erase my memory," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "But you couldn't erase everything. I remember names, places, conversations you thought I had forgotten." She pulled a small notebook from her pocket that she had hidden before her confinement. "I have records here of everything I managed to find out about your operation." The revelation of the notebook completely changed the dynamic of the situation. Dr. Castle realized he was truly cornered, and his mask of medical professionalism began to crumble. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," he said, his voice now filled with desperation and anger. "These children represent the future of medicine. Their gifts could revolutionize treatment, save lives." "Liar," Iris said with a firmness impressive for her 4 years. "You don't want to save anyone. You want to use children like us to gain money and power." She approached him without fear, Rune returning to her arms. "Rune showed me where the other children are. They are very scared and very sad." "Where?" Nora asked immediately, kneeling beside Iris. "Can you tell us where they are?" The girl closed her eyes and held Rune against her chest, as if consulting an invisible source of information. "There's a big place with many white rooms, far from the city. The children are kept separate from each other, and men in lab coats run tests on them every day." Beatrice, watching everything from her bed, suddenly spoke up with a surprisingly strong voice. "Arthur, Ilara's notebook must have the address. Joshua once told me about a rural property he had bought in the 1980s but never used. I'd bet that's where they're keeping the children." The connection between the past and the present was revealing itself in ways no one had imagined. Ilara quickly consulted her notebook, flipping through pages filled with hasty notes. "Found it," she said, showing a page to Nora. "St. Clara's farm, 40 miles from here, and there's more. records of monthly payments made by a front company linked to the research institute that was paying Valerie. Dr. Castle, realizing his options were running out, tried one last play. "You don't understand the scientific importance of what we do," he said, addressing Arthur specifically. "Your niece could help cure diseases that conventional medicine can't treat. Wasting that potential is a crime against humanity." "The crime is using children as experiments," Arthur replied, with a controlled fury that made Dr. Castle back away. "My niece is a 4-year-old girl who deserves to have a normal childhood, not be studied like a lab rat." The fierce protection he felt for Iris had become the driving force behind all his actions. As the officers prepared to take Dr. Castle and Valerie away, Iris approached her former aunt with a curious expression. "Why did you do bad things to my family?" she asked, with the devastating innocence only children possess. "Didn't you know you would make everyone sad?" Valerie, handcuffed and clearly defeated, looked at the girl with a mixture of shame and resentment. "You don't understand, child," she said bitterly. "Joshua promised me things. He promised me a better life, a family. When I found out he had lied about everything, that he had other women, other secret children—" Her voice broke, revealing years of hurt and betrayal. "That doesn't justify hurting innocent children," Ilara said firmly. "I also suffered because of Joshua's lies, but I chose to protect my daughter, not harm other families." The contrast between the two women who had been deceived by the same man was stark. One had chosen protective love, the other destructive revenge. At that moment, one of the officers received a radio communication that changed everything. "Nora, we've just received confirmation that they've found St. Clara's farm. There's evidence the location was being used for illegal activities involving minors. A rescue team is on the way." The news brought immense relief to everyone, but also tension about what would be found there. "Are the children okay?" Iris asked immediately, her concern for others being a priority, even in her own difficult situation. The officer hesitated before answering, clearly not having complete information about the condition of the children found. "They're investigating now," he said, gently. "But the important thing is that they are safe." Iris nodded, but Arthur noticed she wasn't completely satisfied with the vague answer. The girl's empathy for other children in similar situations was deep and genuine. Beatrice, watching the whole situation unfold, called Arthur over to her bed. "My grandson," she said quietly. "There's something else I need to tell you. Something about our family's gifts that can help Iris in the future." Arthur leaned in to listen better, realizing from his grandmother's expression that this was important information. "Joshua told me before he died that our family lineage has a special responsibility," Beatrice whispered. "We are guardians of ancient knowledge of natural healing. Each generation has at least one person with more developed gifts, and that person has the responsibility to protect others with similar abilities." Her words made Arthur look at Iris with a completely new understanding. "Grandma, are you saying Iris has a mission?" he asked, trying to process the weight of this revelation. Beatrice nodded gravely. "And now that she has found her real family, she can begin to learn how to use her gifts safely and responsibly." The idea that his niece was destined for something greater was both inspiring and frightening. As Dr. Castle and Valerie were led away by the officers, Iris approached Arthur and Beatrice, carrying Rune, and with a serious expression on her small face. "Grandma, the other children they hurt will also need help to heal their hearts," she said. "Can I help them when they are free?" "Of course you can, my dear," Beatrice replied tenderly. "But first, you need to finish healing your own family." She looked meaningfully at Ilara, who still showed signs of the trauma she had faced during months of forced confinement. At that moment, Ilara approached and held her daughter's hand, Iris, Mommy is still remembering many things. Can you help me remember the happy moments we had together? The question deeply touched everyone present, showing that the family's true healing was just beginning. I can, Mommy, Iris replied, smiling for the first time in days. Rune and I will help you remember everything that was good. She gently placed the frog in Ilara's hand, and for a moment, mother and daughter stood in silence, connected by a form of communication that went beyond words. The afternoon was ending, and for the first time, in months, the reunited family felt something they had almost forgotten, real hope that the days to come would be better than the ones before. The months following the arrest of Dr. Castle and Valerie were a period of slow and delicate reconstruction for the reunited family. Arthur had transformed his house to accommodate Ilara and Iris, creating an environment where mother and daughter could reconnect, while he learned to be an uncle and brother simultaneously. The psychologist, Dr. Irene Bell, a specialist in family trauma, had become a constant presence in their lives, guiding them through the complex process of emotional healing. Arthur, Dr. Bell said during one of their weekly sessions, I've noticed you've been avoiding talking about your own feelings regarding Valerie's betrayal. All your energy is focused on caring for Iris and Ilara. They were sitting in the living room while Iris played in the yard with Rune, and Ilara organized the medicinal plants she had started cultivating again. I don't see the point in wallowing over Valerie when I have two people who need me now, Arthur replied, watching through the window as his niece taught Rune to jump over small obstacles she had created. She made her decisions, and I need to focus on my family's future. But Dr. Bell shook her head, recognizing the pattern of emotional avoidance she had seen in many patients. Arthur, you can't be an effective caregiver if you don't process your own traumas, she insisted. Discovering that your wife participated in a scheme to kidnap and exploit your niece is something that needs to be psychologically processed. Her words hit a sensitive spot, and Arthur finally allowed some of the repressed emotions to surface. I feel like an idiot, he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. For 15 years, I lived with a person I didn't really know. She knew about Ilara from the beginning, knew I had family I never imagined existed, and she chose to hide it from me. The anger and sadness he had been containing finally found expression. And how does that affect your ability to trust people now? Dr. Bell asked gently. Arthur thought for a long moment before answering. I'm afraid that Iris and Ilara will find out I'm not good enough to take care of them. Valerie always said I was emotionally distant, that I didn't pay attention to the important details. What if she was right? At that moment, Iris ran in through the back door, holding Rune and with a worried look on her small face. Uncle Arthur, is Dr. Bell here to help you too? She asked, approaching him with the sharp perception she always showed. Your heart is heavy today? The girl's observation made Arthur smile, despite his sadness. I'm fine, honey. Just talking with Dr. Bell about grown-up stuff. But Iris came closer and placed her small hand on his arm. Rune said you're sad because of the bad woman, but she can't hurt our family anymore, so you don't need to be worried. Dr. Bell watched the interaction with professional interest. Iris, can you always tell when people are sad? The girl nodded naturally. It's easy. People get different colors around them when they're feeling bad things. Uncle Arthur has a gray color today. The way she described her empathic perceptions was fascinating to the psychologist. And your mother? What color does she have today? Dr. Bell continued. Iris looked out the window where Ilara was watering her plants. Mummy is getting lighter colors every day. In the beginning, when she left the place with the bad medicine, she was almost black with so much sadness. But now there's green and yellow coming back. The accuracy of her emotional observations was impressive. Ilara entered the room at that moment, carrying a small pot with a lemon balm seedling. "Iris, were you talking about colors again?" she asked, smiling at her daughter. "Dr. Bell, my daughter has always had this ability. Since she was little, she could perceive people's emotional state through something she calls colors of the soul." "It's a remarkable gift," Dr. Bell commented. "And during the difficult months you spent apart, Iris, could you feel your mother even from far away?" The girl was quiet for a moment, as if the question brought back painful memories. "I felt that Mommy was very far away and very confused. Sometimes I would wake up crying because her colors were getting weaker." "It was the hardest time of my life," Ilara admitted, sitting next to her daughter. "Even with my memory impaired by the medication, there was a part of me that knew I was forgetting something very important. It was like having a hole in my heart that I couldn't identify. The pain in her voice was palpable, and Arthur instinctively moved closer to offer support. "Ilara," Dr. Bell said, "how has the process of memory recovery been? Are there still blank periods?" The question touched a sensitive point, and Ilara hesitated before answering. "There are some things that are still confusing, mostly about the last few days before the accident at the river. It's as if my mind is protecting those moments." "That's normal in cases of trauma," Dr. Bell explained. "Sometimes the mind represses memories that are too painful to process immediately." But Iris, listening to the conversation, suddenly spoke up with her characteristic wisdom. "Mommy, you don't have to force the bad memories to come back. The important thing is that we're together again now." "Iris is right," Arthur agreed. "We have time for your memory to recover naturally. There's no rush." But Ilara shook her head, showing a determination that had been growing in recent weeks. "There are some things about the Institute and the other children that I need to remember, information that can help the authorities find all those responsible." "Are the other children better now?" Iris asked, her concern for the Institute's victims a constant in her conversations. Dr. Bell had received updates on the case through her professional contacts. "They are being cared for by specialized families and receiving treatment to overcome the traumas. But the recovery process will take time, just like yours." "Can I meet them someday?" Iris insisted. "Maybe I can help them feel better." The girl's generosity, even after everything she had been through, deeply touched all the adults present. "Perhaps in the future, when everyone is more healed," Dr. Bell replied carefully. At that moment, Arthur's phone rang. It was Nora Sampson, with updates on the court case. "Arthur, I have good news. Dr. Castle has been officially convicted on multiple charges related to child abuse, and Valerie has also been convicted of complicity and attempted murder against Ilara." The news brought a sense of justice finally being served. "And the Institute. Did they find out who else was involved?" Arthur asked, putting the phone on speaker so the others could hear. "The investigation uncovered a network of people in several cities who were identifying and kidnapping children with special abilities. We've arrested 8 people in total, and the Institute has been permanently shut down." "Does that mean our family is no longer in danger?" Ilara asked, openly relieved. "Correct, you are completely safe now. And there's more. Documents were found that officially confirm Joshua's paternity for both you and Arthur. This greatly simplifies the legal custody process for Iris." After he hung up, the atmosphere in the house became noticeably lighter. Iris jumped off the sofa and ran to hug Arthur first, then Ilara. "Now we can be a real family without any more bad people trying to separate us," she exclaimed with the pure joy only children can show. "We already are a real family," Arthur corrected, hugging his niece. "But now we can be a family in peace." Dr. Bell watched the scene with professional satisfaction, seeing how the family bonds had strengthened through shared adversity. "There's something I need to do now," Ilara said suddenly. with a determination that surprised everyone. I want to visit Beatrice and thank her for keeping the documents that saved us. And I also want to start teaching Iris about our family knowledge properly. The idea of passing on the family tradition of natural healing represented a new phase of hope for everyone. And I want to learn everything, Iris said excitedly. Rune said there are still many things he can teach me about helping people and animals. The girl looked at each adult in the room. You know that now that we're a united family, our gifts get stronger. It's like every person who loves us adds more light to our colors. Iris's observation perfectly summed up what everyone was feeling, that together they were stronger than they had ever been alone. The healing that had begun with Beatrice's awakening now expanded to the entire family, creating a solid foundation for the future they were building together. A year had passed since Iris appeared in Arthur's life, carrying Rune and forever changing the destiny of the entire family. The house had been completely transformed. What was once a silent and melancholic home now vibrated with laughter, conversation, and the constant movement of a family that had found its true identity. Ilara had fully recovered from the induced amnesia, and her relationship with Iris had blossomed into something even stronger than before the forced separation. On that special March morning, exactly 1 year after their first meeting at the nursing home, the whole family was gathered in the backyard. Beatrice, now fully recovered and living with them, watched with pride as Iris, now 5 years old, tended to the medicinal plants that had grown in the expanded garden they had created together. The yard had become a true sanctuary of natural healing, with herbs, flowers, and therapeutic plants carefully arranged. "Grandma Beatrice," Iris said, running to the old woman who was sitting in her favorite chair under the mango tree she had healed the year before. "Today is the special day you promised you would tell me the biggest secret of our family." Beatrice smiled, her trembling but gentle hands stroking the hair of the girl who had become the light of her renewed life. "It's true, my dear," Beatrice replied, looking around at Arthur and Ilara, who approached upon hearing the conversation. "Today, you turn 5, and our tradition says it's the right age to know the whole truth about who we are." There was something solemn in the old woman's voice, a gravity that made everyone realize this was something very important. "What truth, Grandma?" Arthur asked, sitting on the grass next to Iris, who had placed Rune in her lap and was waiting with her usual full attention. Ilara also joined the circle, her curiosity evident on her face. During her year of recovery, she had regained many memories, but she knew there were still family secrets that her mother, Annabel, had never told her. "Our family," Beatrice began slowly, "is not just a lineage of natural healers. We are direct descendants of one of the last guardian families of indigenous healing knowledge that has been preserved for centuries." Her revelation made everyone lean forward, realizing they were about to discover something fundamental about their identity. "Did Joshua know that?" Ilara asked, her voice filled with emotion. Beatrice nodded gravely. "He knew, and that's why he tried to hide the existence of you both. He was afraid that if people knew the truth about our lineage, we would be persecuted or exploited." Her words finally explained why so many secrets had surrounded the family for decades. "But Grandma," Iris said, her intuition working as always, "does that mean Rune isn't just my friend? Is he part of our family history?" Beatrice looked at the frog with a special tenderness, and for the first time, everyone noticed that there was something different about the amphibian. Its eyes seemed brighter, more aware than would be normal for a common animal. "Rune is not just a frog, my dear," Beatrice said softly. "He is a spirit guardian that our family has protected for generations. Each healer in our lineage has a special animal companion who helps them channel their healing gifts. The revelation explained so much about the extraordinary connection between Iris and Rune. "What do you mean, Spirit Guardian?" Arthur asked, trying to process information that went beyond anything he had ever imagined. Beatrice extended her hand, and Rune leaped from Iris's lap into her palms with a familiarity that surprised everyone. "Our family has the responsibility to protect ancestral healing knowledge that has been passed down from generation to generation for over 200 years. And the animal guardians," she continued, "are spirits of nature who choose to work with us to keep this knowledge safe and use it only for good." As she spoke, Rune began to glow faintly, emanating a soft greenish light that made everyone realize they were witnessing something truly extraordinary. "That's why the bad people wanted to study me," Iris said, finally understanding the magnitude of her heritage. "They knew our family was special in a different way." Beatrice nodded sadly. "Dr. Castle and his associates knew about our lineage. That's how they found you. They had been hunting families like ours for years." Ilara took her daughter's hand, tears of pride and concern streaming down her face. "Does this mean Iris will always have to hide?" she asked. "That she can never live a normal life?" But Beatrice shook her head with a reassuring smile. "No, my child. Times have changed. Now that the Institute has been dismantled and the bad people have been arrested, Iris can grow up learning about her gifts without fear." She looked directly at the girl. "But with great gifts come great responsibilities. You will have to learn to use your abilities only to heal and protect, never to harm." "I already know that," Iris replied seriously. "Rune teaches me every day that our gifts are for helping people and animals who are suffering." The frog returned to her lap, and for the first time, everyone could clearly see the spiritual connection between them, a golden light that visibly united them. "And there's more," Beatrice said, her voice taking on a tone of final revelation. "Arthur, you also have healing gifts. But they were suppressed for years by depression and your lack of knowledge about your true identity." Arthur looked at his own hands, as if seeing them for the first time. "What do you mean, Grandma? I've never shown any special abilities," he questioned. Beatrice smiled wisely. "Remember how you always felt better when you took care of plants? How your furniture factory started to thrive when you began working with intuitively chosen woods? Your gifts manifest through a connection with natural elements." "And me?" Ilara asked. "Were my gifts suppressed too?" Beatrice nodded. "Your gifts manifested in the form of intuitive knowledge about medicinal plants and the ability to feel people's emotional illnesses. That's how you knew I was sick from keeping secrets, and why you started visiting me with treatments." Iris suddenly stood up, running to a small area of the garden where she had planted special seeds with Ilara's help. "Look!" she exclaimed, pointing to small sprouts that had begun to grow overnight. "The celebration plants have been born. They know today is a party day in our family." The small plants emerging from the earth were unlike anything any of them had ever seen before. Leaves that shone softly in the sunlight, and tiny flowers that emanated a fragrance that brought an immediate sense of peace and joy. "They are spirit plants," Beatrice explained with reverence. "They only grow when a guardian family is complete and in harmony. Does that mean we're a real family now?" Iris asked, running back to the circle. "Does it mean we'll never be separated again?" Arthur picked her up, hugging her with all the love that had grown in his heart during that transformative year. "It means we're more than a family," he said, looking at Ilara and Beatrice. "We are a unit destined to do good in the world." Ilara approached, hugging both her brother and her daughter, creating a circle of love and protection that seemed to radiate positive energy throughout the garden. "And now," Ilara asked, "how do we move forward from here?" Beatrice looked at each of them with immense pride. Now you learn together. Arthur will discover his gifts of connection with natural elements. Ilara will expand her knowledge of emotional healing through plants. And Iris... She paused, looking at the girl with special affection. Iris will learn to be the main guardian of this generation. Can I help other children who were hurt? Iris asked, always thinking of others. Can I use my gifts to help the families that were separated like we were? Beatrice nodded with emotion. That is exactly the purpose of our lineage, my dear. To heal not just sick bodies, but broken families, broken hearts, and to help reconnect people with their true identity. As she spoke, more spirit plants began to sprout throughout the garden, as if the earth itself was celebrating the reunification of the guardian family. Rune leaped into the center of the family circle and, to everyone's amazement, began to emanate a more intense golden light. When the light dissipated, there were small, shining seeds all around him. Seeds of renewal, Beatrice explained, to plant in places where healing is needed. Our family is going to plant hope everywhere we go, Iris said, picking up a few seeds with reverence. And we're going to teach other people how to take care of each other with real love. Her words sealed the commitment they were all making, to use their rediscovered gifts to continue the cycle of healing and protection that had defined their lineage for generations. As the sun set over Cedar Creek, the reunited family remained in the garden, planning a future where their gifts would be used to heal not just those close to them, but entire communities in need of hope and renewal. The journey that had begun with the cry of a suffering child had transformed into the discovery of a much greater purpose: to be guardians of healing in a world that desperately needed love and genuine connection. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.